everybody. Welcome into another edition of Head Coach U. I am Bryan Fischer. I'm joined, as always, by Bronco Mendenhall, but a special episode for you. We have a new guest on, Chris Petersen. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, fellas. Good to be here.
The former BYU and Virginia coach Bronco, and now we get the former Boise State and Washington coach in Chris. Some fun times between the two of you. I had to look it up. You guys played each other 4 times. I will say, Chris, you went 3-1 against Bronco. Any good memories from some of those battles back, especially back in those WAC days?
I don't know. Were we in the WAC then?
Mountain West.
Yeah.
Mountain West, yes.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, I don't really remember too many fond memories, to tell you the truth. I mean, that's probably why I'm not coaching right now, standing on that sideline. I remember all the negative stuff. But Bronco and I were talking just a little bit earlier. So there was one game that we won 7-6, and we walk across the field after, and we're just looking at each other like, what in the world just happened? And me kind of being more of an offensive orientated coach, I felt like we lost. Now 7-6, we did not score an offensive touchdown. Our defensive lineman picked it off and ran it in, a 300-pounder. But this is the craziness of college football. So we win a game 7-6, feeling like we lost. We won a game on the blue turf. At the time, it was the highest scoring game in college football history, 4 overtimes. Colin Kaepernick, early in his career, when they were just breaking a pistol out. In fact, it was his first start, was against us. So we didn't really know what was coming. We win, I think it's 69-67 in 4 overtimes, and could not stop him, or they couldn't stop us. And after that game, I was so excited that we scored that many points. But Justin Wilcox was our DC, and you looked at him and you would have thought it was the worst loss in the history of football. I'm like, Justin, we won, move on. So yeah, the craziness of college football.
Bronco, I mean, Chris's offenses were known so much for so many shifts and motions. I would imagine as a defensive guy, especially limited to kind of 20 hours like you are in college, he must be a nightmare to prepare for.
So let's be clear on the 20 hours. The 20 hours is for the players. The coaches that week, so it's 20. What's 7 days a week times 24 hours? That's what that looks like. And then you'd still go in. We'd be walking through in the parking lot right up to the time where you're supposed to get on the bus, trying to get one more just little thing in, and and the players are just ready to go play, right? And the coaches are the ones that are just we're making them more anxious because we're more anxious, trying to get the last shift in, where it's not going to make one bit of difference at that point. And so, yeah, it was. So the innovation, the creativity, the production, but also the fun. I mean, like when we were playing against Boise, those kids offensively, especially for Boise, they were having a blast. And yeah, that was a cool time in college football.
Except for the one night when we couldn't figure out how to get even one touchdown against you. I think you cracked the code.
that would have been one of those codes that maybe had a 4-hour life expectancy, where you cracked it and then it went right back, so somehow we had the lunar eclipse window in there and then it closed again.
Isn't that the craziness of college football though?
Oh, yeah.
And the pressure of the game. I do remember, we're not doing anything. We're not moving the ball. And you could just feel the pressure start to change on our kids. And even the coaches, wait, how is this happening? We're not used to being, slowed down much. And we could, at the end of the day, we couldn't even get an offensive touchdowns. Wild times.
When you see that a little bit. What is that like on the sideline as you're kind of sensing that as a head coach? How are you kind of conveying that to your players and kind of getting them back on track?
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot to that there. And obviously we didn't do a very good job then. You're trying to come up with some answers and get them back to maybe some of the basics that you do that we'd call them groove calls, that you've done a million times over and over so they can just execute. But there are nights, and I think that's just, that's the beauty of sports and certainly college football. I mean, there's just some nights or days where it's just off and it's just not working and you're trying everything in your power to get yourself back on track and everything lines up wrong for you. And there's those nights where everything lines up right. But that's why you got to go play the game.
And that's one of those things that I think, like, for all the success that Chris had through that time, there's a command presence on the sideline where, like, the more consistent coaches, it just seems like there's a calming effect because, right, everyone's looking to you, not only the players, but the coaches, the fans, everyone's looking, right? And if you're watching a TV broadcast, after every play, the camera goes to the head coach. And to me, the less dramatic you are, the better it is for your entire team, right? You're just good because you're just consistent.
And if you're like that, the camera's probably not going to be on you as much because they want the guy ranting and raving. And trust me, I knew that. I wanted to rant and rave. I wanted to throw myself down on the turf and just pound my, like throw a tantrum like a 6-year-old. But I knew that would work against us if we did that. So I would by biting my tongue.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of biting the tongue, I think a lot of coaches nowadays are reacting to some crazy news over the weekend. We just heard 2 head coaches that ended up getting fired in Carl Durrell at Colorado. I think the shocking one, and Chris, you at Fox Sports, you do a ton of Big Ten games as well. I mean, Paul Chryst being let go at Wisconsin, I think sent a shock through the system for fans, for pretty much anybody connected to college football. I'm curious to kind of just get your initial thoughts upon hearing that kind of news.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, that's my initial reaction here. I just don't get it. I think that he, 72% win ratio. And I think he won 6-1 in bowl games, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's really, really been crazy. So I don't know.
Well, it is definitely crazy, and Bronco, I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts. How difficult can it be just to hear that, especially when you're in meetings with some of these guys, across the ways in the spring, you get to know other coaches, especially around your own league. But how difficult can it be for others, just kind of hearing these kind of stories?
Well, you just wonder really what college football is becoming. You have someone in Paul Chryst who is Wisconsin and is having success and is having repeated success. We're not talking about an up year and a down year. We're talking about repeated success with someone authentically and genuinely who fits at that institution, represents it at the highest level. And there's now a small, and I would just say a small blip, right? At the start of a season, game 5 was still a chance to have a great season. And it seems like the history and the performance record to this point overrides 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times to 1, whatever an off start is. And so it makes zero sense to me unless the game is only now about the finances. Like if we've reached that point, then I can't explain, and I don't know everything about the situation other than I know him and I know his program, I know his success. So what's the motive?
Well, I think you said it. It is for some reason only about finances, but I don't know from what I could see and know, it doesn't seem like the fan base has bailed on those guys. But that's, I think, the most frustrating thing for me about college football. Everything about it right now feels so transactional, and it's only about money. And, I don't know, bro. And I know you, Bronco, and I know the reasons you got into coaching back in the day, and not to be, all high and mighty and holier than thou and those type of things. But I mean, that is so much of the joy of the game is being with the kids and the life lessons and the hard times that you go through. And I really that's what, to me, it was at the core all about. And it just, from everything about the game right now, and I love the game, I still do. I mean, when we get to play the game itself and you go between the white lines, it is awesome. And to me, it's never been better. But everything surrounding it, there's just no leadership at the top. There's no guardrails, with the transferring thing and name, image, and likeness, which I think we're all about. I mean, we thought those rules were archaic back in the day. That way the kid can't make $10 off his name if he's going to. But now the pendulum has swung. And so now it's about buying players. And, the big joke in the coaching world, right, is name, image, and likeness. NIL just means now it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that's been going on for, a long. And so I don't know. It's just like, can we get some guardrails? Can we do what's better for the greater good of the game and the kids? It just, because it is still the greatest game out there, I believe, but it'll just be nice. It just feels like the NCAA is truly tapped out of this thing in college football. It has no say, no nothing. And so we just need to get some leadership at the top. I don't know how we do that, because when you don't have that, it's just like every man for himself or every conference for themselves. And so now it just becomes about what's best for me and our conference and how much money we can make.
I think that's where you hit the right point is, so who do the conference commissioners truly answer to now? And so when there isn't a leader, right, or a really defined organizational pattern or structure to deliver the guardrails, as you said, and the infrastructure and the boundaries necessary with young people and money and older people and money, right, then you start getting some of the decisions that just happened with Paul Chryst. But really, again, in this short break that I've taken, all the impact was on relationships, right? Yeah. The players are responding with relationship moments. And that's what I remember. And the moments with other coaches, like you and I walking across the blue turf after a 7-6 game. And what's going to preserve that part at the truest level, where someone goes to Boise and battles his way through his redshirt year, right? Learns from someone great above him, right? Battles on special teams, carves his way into maybe a situational role, and then becomes a starter. And that's foundational to his development as a human being. But right now, the chance they make it past that redshirt year into anything other than special teams, they're looking elsewhere, unless, right, either Chris or I can have some depth of relationship that goes beyond the game and do that so early that holds them. And the world is telling them, why would you wait for that? But the information I'm getting from the players that I've coached is that was everything, right? The relationship moments and the hard things and the patience and the grinding. And that's what made the most impact. And we're designing this thing in the exact opposite direction.
Well, and you said it, the world is telling them. That's the problem. Like, who wants, like, it's not in our human nature to go through hard things. You know that, but that is where the stories are. That is where, you know, all the good stuff really is. I mean, all the players that you've coached over the years, Bronco, that I've coached, and the wonderful experiences that they've had. But that's at the end of that process there.
Right.
I mean, I know half our teams would have probably left after year one or year two had those rules been in place. And I think if you look back, if you ask them, if you look back on them, 98% would say, oh my gosh, I'm glad we didn't have those rules. Like this kind of made me, you know, hang in there. And wow. I would tell guys this in recruiting. Listen, this thing is not going to turn out like you think it is. This is not Disneyland. This is not all like uniforms and great stadiums and, you know, Saturdays where the crowd's going crazy for you. I mean, that happens 6-7 times a year that you got to run out to this blue turf or, you know, Husky Stadium, the greatest setting in college. Like, that's so awesome. But 6 or 7 times a year, what are we talking about? And I would tell them that, like, this is going to have nothing to do with your true happiness. It's going to be like the relationships, the lessons that you learn. And I don't know. And it's just like, that's just going out the door. And I'm not saying, and again, I don't think you are either, like, guys shouldn't be able to transfer. Like sometimes, like, no coach wants a guy to stay there with them when they can't play for you, or there's, you know, you miss and there's a better situation. And so again, it's the fine line, because, you know, you want the kids to stay with you that want to stay. And if there's a kid that, like, just really can't play here, you want them to be able to go somewhere else. But a lot of times, as we know, like, you know, there's a big difference between talent and skill takes a while to develop, especially at the level, you know, at this level that we're coaching at, you know. But you see these kind of, you know, some of these kids are so talented come in that they can get in the mix right away. But most of them, half of them really aren't ready for that. So now the world is telling them, why are you staying there? Like, there's a better opportunity right around the corner. And I don't know. It's just an interesting time, and it'll be interesting to watch this thing evolve.
The other thing regards to what Chris was just saying too is where in this, and this is the hardest part, where in this is the word sacrifice for team, right? Or team over self. And that's tough. And there are certainly occasions where we misevaluate someone and he's just not going to be able to play.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to assistant coaches, and that kid would still want to stay because of his passion for the place or the team.
Yep.
And I'd be telling the assistant coaches, no, he gets to stay, right? Because they'd be wanting to, in their position rooms, possibly elevate past that. And I said, absolutely not, right? This, he deserves, right? This is what we're trying to teach. And so within this whole framework right now, there has to be places, right, for this development and somehow a relationship that goes so deep that the team becomes like in a marriage, right? Where it's the other person first. And so we're kind of creating this environment where this is me over team in almost every situation. And quite frankly, as coaches, we've done some of that to ourselves where we leave before bowl games, right? And we I don't know, leave after 2 years. And so I know that's not a popular thought, but we kind of set a precedent, and now the players, right, they won't play in bowl games or they're going to transfer. And so I don't know, these team or these dynasties, which I would consider what Boise State was when Chris was there, one of those, right, where it was a destination and kids would hold and carve out their way just to be part of that. And man, it's hard to see programs, especially what just happened to Wisconsin. It's hard to see that that's going to be prevalent much longer, if it even is now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I do think everybody feels like there needs to be some, like we say, guardrails. Like, how do we do this where it is for the greater good, it is better for the game, and then most importantly, it is better for the kids. And that doesn't mean like, that every decision that a kid makes committing to a school is the right one. That but there needs to be some sort of slowdown mechanism a little bit, so they can learn those. They can. I don't know. I know it's really. I know I'm walking on thin ice here when we're talking about these life lessons and coaches making and the money that we made coaching football. You can come across like a hypocrite very easily. But I'm not in the game anymore. Like I'm just trying to like look at the game and just go, how do you do it better for the kids? Because like we said, when the game's played, there's nothing better, but everything around it is so transactional, and the messages of the world that they're getting, and it's all about money, and it's all about what's in it for me right now. Like it's just not it.
Well, and as difficult as this reaction to Paul Chryst firing has been, and it's certainly difficult for Paul being an alum of the school, being a Madison native. It is also an opportunity for Jim Leonard, the defensive coordinator. He's going to be the interim. I think everybody around the Badgers program would like him to kind of take hold of that job and kind of take it by its reins. And I'm kind of curious, Chris, going back to your early days when Dan Hawkins left for Colorado, you were elevated pretty quickly there at Boise State into head coach. Did you feel ready for kind of taking that on and running that program, especially given the success that kind of came before you?
At Boise State, you're asking?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Not in a million years. I didn't want the job, to tell you the truth. When Dan Hawkins decided to go to Colorado, I was his offensive coordinator and at Boise. And so in my mind for a couple of days, I was going to Boise with him. But then it just kind of hit me that I had really no excitement about leaving. I just wanted to be the best offensive coordinator that I could be in the country. I was trying to be just as good as I could be. And I felt like there was more meat on the bone. So I was still learning and getting better, I felt. And so now my world's turned upside down. And thinking, okay, I'm just going to go do that job at Colorado. But, you got to trust your instincts and your gut sometimes where there wasn't excitement. I'm going to go to Boulder and do the same thing. I just wasn't feeling that. So then I'm thinking, okay. I remember Dan saying, well, if you want it, and Dan was so awesome. He was he was so good to the assistants always, but he's like, hey, well, if you want to be the head coach here, I think they make you the head coach here. And I'm thinking, well, I don't really want to do that either. But, I knew you're going to hire somebody else and then they might not want me, or we might not mesh with our philosophies. So I'm like, oh boy, and so, because I knew I wasn't really prepared. My whole skill set was like, you pay attention to what the head coach does, but you're not like working on that or fixated on that. You're fixing on how to be a great coordinator. And so I take the job, and I mean, every day for a couple of years, no, not every day for a couple of years. Every day as a head coach, you're learning something new, but there's such a a lack of really what is going on in the head coach's world. So, I mean, it was like every day a crash course in management and leadership and all these type of things. And I'm looking around like, why the D, we'd have a problem with the D lineman or something. And I'm like, well, why are you coming to me with that? And they're like, this is your problem now. And I'm like, oh, here we go. But really the crazy thing was too, I inherited a really good team, a really experienced team. I was there for a lot of years. I knew the culture. I loved the culture. You put a couple tweaks on it, to maybe pour gas on the fire a little bit of newness on it. And then we go win all of our games. So everybody thinks you got it figured out. Oh, I didn't have it figured out. Timing is everything in life. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And I mean, I really felt like, that was me for the most part.
Well, you were both lucky and good, especially that season, your first season. I mean, I think everybody understands, the success that you guys had. You kind of elevated it there. Did setting that bar kind of high? Did you kind of worry about that almost a little bit? Internalize kind of some of the issues, like, hey, I got to maintain it at winning and going to BCS games all the time.
I remember one of my friends called me afterwards, and he's like, "Just get out, just hang it up. Right now, just get out." And I'm like, huh? He's like, it's only going to be downhill from now, And I remember another one of my buddies coming out. And so, things started to change. We win a big game and people are like, our president was really great there in terms of building facilities and stuff. And so we built a brand new press box. And so I remember it was halfway done. One of my friends comes out. He was a high school coach. He looks at it and he goes, "How does that make you feel?" And I'm like, "Not good." It's like more pressure. And he goes, "That's exactly what I was thinking about." I think that, and I know some coaches that I talk with regularly that are super successful. And you try to make it not being all about the end of the record, the winning, the money, the profits. But that's all that anybody cares about. And so for you to keep perspective and keep fighting for what is important, you almost have to be Superman. You have to put a plan together. This is a whole nother topic we could talk about. But I mean, everything in the world today does not care about anything, the process. They just care about the results. And sometimes when you have good results, like Paul Chryst did, it's still not good enough. So I'm still trying to figure this out. What is good enough? Because again, as soon as you set that bar to whatever it's going to be, it's just a short matter of time before that is not good enough.
And Bronco, I'm sure you have had to deal with that as well. I mean, all the success you had there at BYU and then building Virginia up. I mean, I would think that is also some unique pressures that every coach has to deal with.
I think there's a shelf life. And so it's not only how many wins, it's then how you're winning. Like, and I think in the industry, you call it style points. And then the head coach, they expect you to be part of an entertainer as well. And then your press conference gets graded after the game, like it's a separate thing from the game. And so the young, I remember coming into one of the games at Virginia, and we just won, I think 9 games and we're going to the Orange Bowl. And it's the halftime. And I remember a kid, I looked over and he's in the locker room and he's grabbed his phone. And I was like, when did this become a thing? Because normally I would sequester myself off and not, just for a little bit. And these kids are measuring themselves, but now adults are measuring themselves with attention capital. Like how many likes, what do people think? Even to the point where the players were looking at halftime to think what other people thought of how they played, when they're supposed to be looking internally to how they played and listening to their coaches, but they're so concerned. And then as the expectations grow, like Pete says, where then, what if there's no more jokes that you have as the head coach? Or what if you're out of trick plays? Or what if it's just one of those days where you don't win by enough, and it might be year 7, I don't know, or year 6. And there's kind of this imposed time frame that if you don't measure that, then you feel momentum kind of being lost. And the money is driving all that at an exponential rate. And really by year 2 now, if you're not showing a significant trend almost straight up, or by year 3, that's not good enough. Well, then how do you sustain that? And what we're learning is not many are. And so then either the player, the coach, or the AD, someone's leaving, or everyone's leaving, and you kind of start over.
Chris, we were mentioning Dan Hawkins there. He's of course back at UC Davis now. That's where you got your start playing and coaching, as for the legendary Jim Sokor. What was it about that environment though that he created? Because it's not just you. We mentioned just the line of UC Davis alums or people that have gone to that program that have gone on to have success at other major college football programs. It is quite the list, including yourself. What was it about that kind of environment at UC Davis that kind of allowed you guys to transition easily, and into having success at places like Boise State and Washington?
Yeah. All I can say is I was blessed with game-changing coaches that were so far ahead of their time, not only in terms of teaching the game. So Jim Sokor was an unbelievable teacher of offensive football. In fact, Bill Walsh's son had played a couple years before at UC Davis. So Bill Walsh and Jim Sokor were very good friends. And so Coach Sokor, he was a legend in the coaching circles at little old UC Davis, Division II at the time. But so he was always using these guys and staying, cut above. We ran the West Coast offense when I was there, when Bill Walsh was just breaking it out. And so the game was finally taught to me where it started to make sense. I was a quarterback back in the day, and, I'd have those games where it was just like terrible. And the next game you'd come out and play pretty well. And it was just so up and down. And because I really kind of look back on it, I was finally taught in this really unique, systematic fashion what I was looking at, how to do this. And it all came through the West Coast system and Jim Sokor just being this elite teacher. And then there was Bob Foster, who was another one there that took over for Jim Sokor. And then Bob Biggs, all these guys who then became the head coach after, they were all in this program together for a long time. But so it wasn't just about them teaching, but it was also how they treated the kids. I always say this, I don't remember anyone ever raising their voice during a game at practice, unless it was a positive thing. Now, this is back in the day, 30 years ago, right? With old school coaching, where, people are in your face and all this kind of stuff. They were the modern coaches long before the modern athlete and the modern times we're in. And so it was just wonderful. You talk about building self-esteem and self-confidence, that was their whole thing. So you'd make a mistake and, you're kind of used to maybe cowering down from maybe some past coaches. And it's that wasn't it at all. They were just teachers of the game and really even teachers of life long before any of that stuff was cachet to do, was cool to do. I mean, they were just ahead of their times.
And that just what a beautiful, beautiful experience. And then, Chris gets to pass that on to his program, and the impact of those coaches, that is, I think, at its purest form, what we're trying to do. And just, it feels so good to hear that. And the impact it's made not only on other coaches and a very successful head coach and Pete, but the players that got to play for him as well. Right. That's the greatest gift you can give, which to me is the purest reason to coach, right? Is to build people, what a beautiful story.
I mean, I look back, Bronco, and I've told this many times, from my time at Davis playing, and then I coached there for 5 years. We had a freshman team with a bunch of players, and that 2 years I was the freshman coach. And then I coached 3 years there before I really wasn't going to be a coach. My dad was a coach, a junior college coach forever. So I had been I'd seen it firsthand, this coaching thing. And it wasn't until I really got with these guys and really, had that experience. And then I was coaching, getting a master's degree on the side, and I was going to go do something different. And so I think about that experience and fast forward towards late into my career. And I would just shake my head and go wait, how did I get here? This, and not that where I was all bad. I wasn't trying to say this was all bad, but it was so different than what Bronco's talking about. It was just purity, love of the kids, love of the game. It's just, and again, those were just spectacular, good old day times, looking back at those memories. And so again, that's my reference point. And when we're talking about what's going on in college football today, certainly at this highest level, man, it's mind numbing to me.
I mean, Chris, you were also known kind of for doing the same thing that Jim did at UC Davis there in terms of developing your staff. I mean, Brian Harson's at Auburn. You had Justin Wilcox now at Cal, Andy Avalos, of course, back there at Boise running the show. Even Alex Van Pelt, your brief trip to the East Coast there at Pitt is now the Browns OC. What is it about in terms of developing your own staff? You know, that you were able to kind of foster that I guess loving program to where guys could have success and then move on and run their own program.
Yeah, well, and I think Bronco, I mean, this is what Bronco would attest to. This is what it's all about. It is about the kids in the locker room and being able to, like, you know, teach them. And I mean, I know this sounds so corny and so cliche-ish, but to use the platform of sport, of this experience, to become better people. I mean, that's what it's about. And then to have your staff and to do things like in a unique way to you that you're all about. It's about your formula for success. Because, like, there's no magic potion, but there is a formula for success. There's 100%. The building blocks of a successful formula, of a successful program, have to come through these foundational blocks, in my opinion. And so then to get everybody on the same page and create alignment, and then have the staff push it out to the players and get everybody rowing in the same direction is super, super difficult to do, but so rewarding when you get that thing all going the same direction and you can feel like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. The best teams that I've been on, I'd call them gold standard teams. There's probably maybe 5 of them that I've been on in my playing and coaching career. And there is no better feeling when you get that, when you create that environment or you're part of that environment. I mean, it's just like something you'll never forget. And it's not even really about the wins. A couple of those gold standard teams that I'm talking about were not the undefeated teams. I will remember this. So my first year as a head coach, right, at Boise, we are undefeated. I had that on one of my, I've saved this goal list that I've had that I started when I was like just getting out of college. I look at that list and I just laugh at it. But one of my goals was to be on an undefeated team as a player or coach an undefeated team. I always never got it done. My first year as a head coach, we're undefeated. We beat Oklahoma. We're undefeated. I'm not kidding you. About 2 weeks later, I'm looking around and I don't want to say I'm depressed, but I'm certainly like disillusioned and trying to figure out like, wait, that's all it is. That's what it feels like. Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. What am I missing here? And everybody around you, you know, the world around you is going crazy for this season, for this game. And I'm like, oh boy, am I on the wrong track here? Because that's not what it's about. Like, we're a great team. I love that. But just being undefeated in itself and all those things. And so like I was going to say, a couple of these gold standard teams that I'd say were not undefeated. We performed at a high level, but it wasn't all about the record. It was about the relationships and the experience and the hard things that we had to go to together to overcome. That's what it was about.
It couldn't be. The hard things together is one of the greatest gifts we can do with people that really care about you and you care about them. That's transformational. And I remember a story. I'm not going to share the given head coach, but won a national championship, is holding up the crystal ball with all the confetti coming down. And I'm visiting with him. And he's saying in that moment, while he's holding up the ball and the confetti's coming, he's in his mind thinking there has to be more than this. Right. In that moment, that's what is in his head. So just like what Chris was saying, the winning, it's essential to keep your job and to do the job. But man, it's not sustaining.
Bronco, just along those lines, I know a coach that was an assistant coach at the time that was on a national championship team really not that long ago. And they had so much talent and they just overwhelmed people with talent. And he said within a half hour after the ceremony and all that, the locker room was completely cleared out and gone. That they had won at the highest level, the same thing. But the team, it wasn't what I would call this gold standard team that was just connected. And it was the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And we went through all this and we loved each other. We made each other better. And It was about us, and it was about we, not me. It was all those things that we talk about. They win a national championship, and it was just like people couldn't wait to get out. Mm-hmm. And so it really like is about those things. But the crazy thing is you have to like go through these life lessons to experience what you and I have experienced, to then be able to pass them on to others, to wait, no, I'm just telling you, like, you're heading down the wrong path. You know, I did this exercise when I stepped away, wrote a letter to my younger self. And one of my buddies encouraged me. He goes, you should write a letter to your younger self. Like, what would the lessons, what would you tell your younger self? And I'm like, I don't want to do that. You know, why do I want to do that? I don't want to go do that. So it took me a month or so. And then finally I said, what would I tell myself? So I sat down and I just started writing. And I was like, whoa. I was like, who's writing this? It was like an outer body experience. It was like, hold on, pump the brakes, slow down. You're heading the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And it, you know, it had to do with all my competitiveness and how, you know, it can be about like you being so competitive and just wanting to win. And it's just like not, that's part of it. But like the important things, it's just really not about the winning. Like you said, Bronco, that is important. I'm not trying to minimize that. Profits, winning, success, however you're measuring that in your business, in your teams, it is important. Because if we are losing and not getting results, it's miserable. We know that. But that's only a really small portion of what's really important in this thing when it's done right.
And Chris, you've brought up for a couple of times your kind of recruiting philosophy. I talked with Bronco about it, just how you got to find the right fit with the players in particular to kind of buy into your vision. You're known for recruiting some OKGs, you know, our kind of guys. I'm just kind of curious how you kind of meld that overall approach to how your program is being run and you want it to be run, and marrying that with the recruits that you're trying to bring in.
Yeah. And so, you know, again, it goes way back to early in my coaching days as an assistant coach. And it really was around like having a room that maybe, you know, a group of guys that there might have been a guy or two that I either inherited or you just were not on the same page with on how you want to operate on it and what you're all about and what they're all about. And I remember this one season, like I had a player that might have been the best player on our team. And on Saturdays, it was like, wow, unbelievable. So fun to watch him play. I mean, spectacular. The fans love him. We all love him. And then Sunday through Friday was just a lot of pain. Like we were not on the same page. It was, you know, it just felt like it was a lot of babysitting, a lot of just making sure we're getting from point A to point B, academics. Are you taking care of this? Like, and I just remember at the end of that season being so worn out and going, this isn't what it's about. It's about recruiting kids that really fit your philosophy, what you're all about, knowing what they're walking into. And if they're not about that, then they should go somewhere else because it's about being aligned and then working through hard things together because there's going to be a lot of hard things. And so that's where it really came from. And so then when I became a head coach, I just kind of took that philosophy. It's like, listen, what are we all about? What are the things? Like, who are we looking, you know, as coaches, what are we all about? And then who are the kids? And so really this thing was about and so this character part of things, so there's talent level, right? So you're obviously looking for talent. They got to jump that bar. But I've been around so many talented people that go nowhere, that do nothing. Like, I mean, Bronco, I'm sure that's just like, you could count and endless people. Like, why is this? Why can't they get it? Well, to me, I think there's this other segment that I would call, you know, we'd say like, the talent level is the floor, but the character level is the ceiling. Now, when I'm talking about character, though, I'm talking about something a little bit different than just moral character. You know, I think that's important. Don't get me wrong. But I think this character is about performance character or skills. So what are those? Like, that's the relationships that the behavior that governs the relationship with yourself, how competitive you are, how passionate you are, how maybe disciplined you are. It's the things that get you up really early in the morning to go do your craft. And then on the other hand, there is relational character or skills. And that's how you relate to others. And so what are those that you're looking for in your people, the kids you're going to recruit, or the staff members? And knowing what those are, and at least trying to, have some big rocks that like, these are the important things in this organization. And I would call it like you're stacking the deck, right? Like you're just, yeah, they got talent, but do they have all this other stuff, this chemistry stuff, this character stuff to really be able to build skill and go through all these hard things? Because they don't have that. Like it's such a hard, difficult process that you've got to be able to weather the storms, right? To take the next step. So that's how the OK. And so then it was like, well, what are these guys? Well, they're like kind of like, I remember back in the day, like people were talking about old G's. It was old OGs. It's like, we're not old G's. They're like OKGs. They're our kind of guys. And that's how it morphed into that. And so that's what we were looking for. And yeah, that's how that whole thing came about.
And Bronco,
anytime you're that distinctive about what you're looking for, or you're that clear about who you are, what your culture is, and then the real test is executing against that, right? So here comes a great talented player that will make a difference, but just doesn't fit. Saying no a lot of times is harder than saying yes. And so the identities of those programs that Chris coached, you could sense the alignment because of the selection and assessment. And man, the more clear you are about selection and assessment and being able to say no to the wrong ones, man, does that make your week better. And it's just, no matter how much you win, if you're doing it with kids that aren't aligned, just for me personally, that's not worth it.
Yeah. And I would tell you this, I really got irritated, to tell you the truth, towards the end of my career about this OKG label, because people took it the wrong way. Mm-hmm. They took it to be like just these really kind of goody two-shoe kids that weren't really that good of players. They were just all these clean cut kids. It wasn't anything that wasn't that at all. Like we had our formula. It was about kids that were passionate about football, that loved the game, that were going to love their teammates, that it wasn't maybe just all about them, that they really were like, and you can find these answers out by talking to their coaches and their assistant coaches. And so it really, like, it didn't matter. Like the beautiful thing, Bronco, and you can attest to this, is the diversity in the locker room. To have these kids that come over from everywhere, and then you come together and it's just like, this is so beautiful. Like we're all the same deep down, like what we're all about, how we were raised, the culture and all those type of things, they might be different, but when you get down to it and we're going through it, man, it's all about, you can just feel we're all the same, and we all need love and support and care and acceptance if we're going to do something special in our lives, right? Like we need people in that to be, and so to bring that locker room together and like to teach those kind of concepts and to meld that together. And, that's the beauty of coaching. That's what it's all about right there.
Yeah, and Chris, I've been talking with Bronco quite a bit about his pause right now that he's on, and getting back into coaching, and that's kind of why we're doing this podcast. You said on a different podcast this past summer, after you left the Washington job, you kind of never allowed yourself to reset. And I'm kind of curious, these past 3 years, how you've gone about doing that.
Well, let me go back to Bronco here, because what Bronco is doing, in my opinion, is the smartest thing that any coach that's been at it for a long time could do. To step away. It's almost like you take a sabbatical. And in fact, you will not be at your best if you don't do what Bronco's doing. And I heard something, Bronco, I think you were talking to a reporter or something, and somebody's going, hey, how would you convince an AD that like you really want to do this, that you're passionate about it? And I'm just shaking my head going, wow, do people not get this? This job, this coaching football, college football this day, it is a 24/7, truly 365 job. Even if you try to break away and go on vacation, you are not away. You're going to get calls. You're going to, it's just like, and you really have to build the skill in your mind to be able to compartmentalize. Okay, when I go home, I'm at home. I am where my feet are. I don't take this job with me. That's a whole nother discussion. It takes tremendous skill building. But to me, like what Bronco's doing, stepping away, getting refreshed, getting recharged, creating, making sure that he's got perspective. Because the reason that I stepped away is because after so many years in the grind, you just get worn out. This is a marathon with a sprinter's mentality. So you are sprinting every day and you just pour all that energy out. And then all of a sudden, the walls of society that are pushing on you on things that are not important, they start to squeeze you, and your vision and your focus becomes very narrow. So now you're a narrowed version of your best self. And so you need time to be able to recharge, refocus, be able to keep perspective and fight for perspective. And so that's what Bronco was doing. When I stepped away, I didn't know, am I going to coach again? All I know is I lost perspective, and this is not feeling right. I'm at the, maybe the pinnacle of my career and being at the University of Washington, this beautiful place with these awesome kids that we've spent like years recruiting. I mean, everything was awesome. It was great, except for me. I wasn't great, and I knew it, and I was slipping, and my perspective was off. And I started to do that a little bit at the end of my time at Boise. That's why I did left. I mean, I think Bronco's saying, I think every place has a shelf life. He's spot on. It's really a shelf life between us. Have we worn out, our welcome there? Is there some new growth opportunities? And then the people get tired of you, no matter how well you're doing. They just get tired of that message. And so it's a really complicated thing. But I just think this, I've learned so many things being out of it. And I know this, what Bronco's doing, stepping away, and he needs to get back into it like the game needs Bronco Mendenhall, is the best thing that he could possibly do. And I just heard people, somebody questioning that. Well, how would you convince an AD? Well, I will tell you this. If an AD is on it, there's going to be no convincing. They're going to know, oh, this dude is sharp. He steps away at a high point, the things that he did at Virginia. And then now he's getting refreshed, recharged, getting that perspective lined back up. And now here I go. That didn't really answer your question, but that's what goes when I think about Bronco.
So Pete, you said that almost exactly as I wrote it for you. Thanks for presenting that in that endorsement.
I really kind of feel kind of cheesy saying that, because it's like, yeah, here I am promoting my buddy. That's not, it's just like, people don't know from the outside what the arena feels like, and especially when you've done it for a long time. So now you got a guy with all this wisdom, this experience, but the pressures are extreme. And so to step out, I think every coach should do that. Like guys that have done really things, to see a guy step out and go, hey, no, I'm just getting recharged here. I'm going to reevaluate things in my life, get a better perspective, and I'll probably step back in. But I don't see anyone doing that. I see them getting fired and then wanting to claw their way back in because now they got all this scarring because, that's another conversation.
So Brian, there couldn't have been a better first guest for us because, right, there's no perspective that you can't have the perspective that Pete has without the success, but also the time, but also the unique experiences. There's not a point of reference in college football that he hasn't had. And it's really fun as a human being, but also a coach, to then run into a peer that is like-minded and authentic and genuine and truthful, right? And is willing to share that. And so it just seemed like this, who better to be first on our show to just add a benchmark as what this really is, or what it could be, or at its best what it is. And so just really fun to listen.
It is, and now we were kind of joking, but before we didn't record, Chris, you're looking great. You're feeling refreshed. I'm kind of curious, as you spoke about Bronco in that way, and taking this pause. I mean, I say this, and I might get in trouble. We share some common bosses at Fox Sports. They might not like me asking, but I mean, do you kind of feel a little bit like saying, yeah, maybe I would like to get back into coaching?
Yeah, the one thing I know, Brian, is I've learned over time to never say never. I learned that a long time ago, because you hear coaches say, oh no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going there. And what I've learned is they really mean that at that time. But life changes and you change. And so then things shift. And so I've learned to never say never. But where I am right now, I don't see myself stepping back in between the lines. I will say this, I am extremely passionate of making an impact still. So I felt like all the stuff, like you can make such an impact with these kids, these 18 to 24-year-old kids that we're coaching. I just, where I am in my life, I just want to make an impact with a different crowd. Maybe even more of an impact, rather than having your own team that you can get to other coaches. I work with other coaches and be able to share some of these things and partner and be a thinking partner for other coaches. That I know, like I am more passionate now from the lessons that I've learned going through it, from the lessons I've learned from stepping out of it, to get perspective, to know what everybody's going through, and to be able to assist and help and, walk with people on their journey and really try to make an impact for them. So I'm all about making an impact. I just don't see it at this time in the lane that I was in before.
Well, that is well said, and Bronco is 100% right. We could not have asked for a better guest than Chris Petersen, the former Boise State and Washington head coach. Chris, thanks you so much for joining us. We'll have to have you on again. I think we could probably do another hour or two just on some of those Boise State and Washington teams that you had, but we really appreciate you joining us.
Guys, it's awesome. I'm glad you're doing this podcast and talking about type of things, because I think a lot of, just a lot of people could, use this and help their own perspective on things, especially if they're into coaching, because wow, what an impact we can make with all these kids that need us now more than ever before.
Absolutely.
Pete,
well,
thanks so much for being on. It feels like we were just talking on the phone. Other people just happen to be listening this time.
My pleasure, guys. You guys have a great day.
Absolutely. Well, we really appreciate it, Chris Petersen. And for Bronco Mendenhall, I'm Bryan Fischer. Thank you so much for joining us here on another edition of Head Coach U. We'll see you next week.